Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. The Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry is not just an educational institution, it's a living, breathing organism within the magical world, brimming with secrets, history, and mystery. Millions of Harry Potter fans have dreamed of receiving that coveted letter and walking the castle's ancient corridors. The films gave us a visual glimpse of that dream. However, as often happens with adaptations, not everything made it to the screen. Some important details, ones that explain how the school truly works, were left behind. Today, I'll reveal 5 such moments that were vital in the books but completely skipped over in the movies. Enjoy watching. Number 1. Muggles can't see Hogwarts. Many fans dream of stepping into the halls of Hogwarts, but there's one major problem. If you're a Muggle, you'll never get in. In fact, you won't even see it. As Hermione explained in The Goblet of Fire. "It's bewitched," said Hermione. "If a Muggle looks at it, all they see is a ruin with a sign over the entrance saying, 'Danger, do not enter, unsafe.'" This enchantment makes Hogwarts completely invisible to non-magical people. In the films, this is barely touched upon, even though it's a powerful example of how thoroughly the magical community protects its secrets. Number 2. Who prepares the food? Viewers are dazzled by the magnificent feasts in the Great Hall where tables overflow with food, but the question remains, where does it all come from? The books provide the answer. Food can't be created by magic. It has to be made the old-fashioned way, and it's not chefs who cook it, but house elves. Yes, dozens of tireless elves work in Hogwarts' underground kitchens, preparing meals for both students and staff. This fact deeply upset Hermione, prompting her to found the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare. Unfortunately, the movies completely ignored this storyline, and unjustly so. Number 3. Where is the Hufflepuff common room? Hufflepuff House is often underestimated, seen as the leftover house for those who didn't make it into Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, or Slytherin. But that couldn't be more wrong. One charming detail the films omitted is the location of the Hufflepuff common room. It lies near the kitchens, hidden behind a plain portrait. This means Hufflepuff students are the first to reach the food when hunger strikes, an undeniable perk after a long day of classes. Number 4. Why was the Whomping Willow planted? On the surface, it seems bizarre. Why plant a giant, violent tree on school grounds? One that can literally maim students. In truth, the Whomping Willow is part of a carefully designed system created for one student, Remus Lupin. To protect both him and his classmates during his werewolf transformations, Dumbledore built a secret passage beneath the tree leading to the Shrieking Shack, a place where young Lupin could safely isolate during the full moon. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, this backstory is only lightly touched upon. The book, however, explores it in full, giving the tree a deeply meaningful role. Number 5. Magic versus gadgets. Technology doesn't work. This might be the saddest part for today's tech-savvy teens. In Hogwarts, Muggle technology is completely useless. Phones, laptops, tablets, even a basic radio won't work, as explained in Goblet of Fire. All those things Muggles use instead of magic, electricity, computers, radar and all that, they don't work at Hogwarts. There's too much magic in the air. No Wi-Fi, no selfies in the trophy room, no late-night chats with friends from other houses. Everything is old-school, owls, handwritten letters and hallway conversations. It's a crucial part of Hogwarts life, and yet the films barely acknowledged it. Number 6. Astronomy classes are a big deal. Hogwarts students don't just learn charms and potions, they study the stars. Astronomy is a required subject through 5th year, ending in a practical OWL exam under the open sky. Every week they climb to the top of the astronomy tower. At midnight, their breath fogging in the cold air, telescopes aimed at the heavens. In the Philosopher's Stone, it's written, "Every Wednesday at midnight they climbed up to the top of the tallest tower for astronomy lessons and learned how to chart the stars." It's one of the few lessons where silence isn't just expected, it's sacred. During Harry's 5th year, the Astronomy OWL becomes a moment of surreal calm. While students struggle to track the moons of Jupiter, chaos brews below. In Order of the Phoenix, they witness Hagrid being attacked and McGonagall struck by stunning spells, all from their telescope platforms. It's a haunting moment, education unfolding above violence. None of this appears in the films. The tower, the tension, the stars, they're left out. And with them, the quiet truth that learning magic includes learning the universe. Number 7. Hogwarts Ghosts. Matter more than you think. The ghosts of Hogwarts do more than float through walls. In the books they speak, they feel, and they remember. Each house has its own ghost. They're not decorations, they're witnesses. Nearly headless Nick, the Gryffindor ghost, is more than a nickname. He's a confidant. After Sirius Black's death in Order of the Phoenix, Harry is lost in grief. It's Nick who approaches him, gently explaining the difference between those who die and those who choose to linger. Ghosts, he says, are imprints too afraid to move on. In that quiet moment, Harry begins to understand the finality of death. He realizes Sirius isn't a ghost because he chose peace over fear. The films leave this out. Instead, Harry stands alone in his pain. No guidance, no conversation, no Nick. But in the book, the ghost becomes a teacher, someone who, through tragedy, helps Harry face his future with clearer eyes. The other ghosts carry stories too. The Bloody Baron's silence hides a murder. The Grey Lady, Helena Ravenclaw, guards the secret of a lost Horcrux. Her full tale isn't told until the Deathly Hallows, when Harry learns she was Rowena Ravenclaw's daughter, killed by the Baron. These ghosts carry history in their hollow voices. They are part of Hogwarts itself. In the films, their presence fades, but in the books, they are always watching, always remembering. Number 8. The structure of Hogwarts exams. Hogwarts students don't just wave wands and hope for the best. They study, they cram, and when the time comes, they sit exams that test more than memory. They test nerves, control, and real magical skill. The ordinary wizarding levels arrive in 5th year. The nastily exhausting wizarding tests come later, harder, and more selective. These aren't just written tests. Students must perform spells before ministry examiners, strangers in plum-coloured robes who judge every flick of a wand. In Order of the Phoenix, the pressure is real. Hermione races through her parchment, while Ron nearly catches his sleeve on fire. Harry performs a flawless Patronus, summoning a silver stag in front of an examiner named Tofty. The old man claps in delight. It's one of Harry's proudest moments. But the stress is everywhere. Dean Thomas mixes up his antidotes, and Ernie Macmillan faints during a transfiguration trial. These scenes paint a vivid picture of a school where success isn't guaranteed by charm alone. The films, while visually grand, skip most of this. They show students in class but rarely under real pressure. Gone are the anxious whispers, the ink-stained fingers, and the moments where magic falters under fear. In the books, exams shape futures. They decide who becomes an aura, a healer, or just another name lost in the ministry's back offices. The stakes are high. The silence of the Great Hall during OWLs is louder than a Quidditch crowd. That silence never made it to the screen. Number 9. How do Hogwarts letters find children? In the films, Harry's Hogwarts letter arrives by owlpost in a whirlwind of chaos. Dozens flood Privet Drive. None of them explain how the school knew where he was. The question lingers. How does Hogwarts track every magical child, even ones hidden in cupboards under the stairs? The answer lives in 2 enchanted objects deep within the castle, the Book of Admittance and the Quill of Acceptance. These artifacts sit in a locked tower, untouched by human hands. When a magical child is born, the book snaps shut. The quill, sensing even the faintest trace of magic, writes the name inside. No one intervenes. Not McGonagall, not Dumbledore. The magic does the choosing. If the child continues to show magical potential, their name stays. If not, the ink fades. This system has been in place for over 1,000 years. J.K. Rowling revealed this secret on Pottermore, lifting the curtain on one of Hogwarts' quietest mysteries. According to her, the quill often tries to record names that the book refuses. Only when both agree does the child become a future student. It's how Severus Snape, born to a witch and a Muggle father, secured his place. It's how Hermione Granger, with no magical relatives, was never overlooked. When the child turns 11, Professor McGonagall takes over. She checks the list, she prepares the letters, and no matter where the child lives, no matter how hard the Muggles try to hide them, the letter always finds its way. That's why Harry's invitation found him on a rock in the middle of the sea, not by luck, but by ancient silent magic. Number 10. Talking portraits are not just decoration. The moving portraits in Hogwarts are more than magical decor. In the films, they mostly serve as comic relief or curious background details. But in the books, they are alive with purpose. Each painting holds the essence of a person who once lived, and many are former headmasters and headmistresses. These portraits offer advice, deliver warnings, and even pass along secret knowledge that can change the course of events within the castle. After Dumbledore's death, his portrait appeared behind the headmaster's desk, watching silently, but he didn't just sit and stare. He guided Severus Snape during his year as headmaster. In the Deathly Hallows, Harry seeks out this portrait after the final battle, and Dumbledore's painted eyes still carry that familiar mixture of pride and sorrow. His presence in the portrait becomes a final act of mentorship. Though his body was gone, his wisdom remained. Portraits can also travel. A frame in the headmaster's office can link to another in St. Mungo's Hospital or the Ministry of Magic. In Order of the Phoenix, Phineas Nigellus Black moves between his portrait in the headmaster's office and another in Grimmauld Place, carrying messages for Dumbledore and later for Harry. His reluctant help plays a role in saving lives. This ability to spy and communicate turns the portraits into a kind of magical surveillance system that the films never truly explore. By omitting this, the films miss a layer of Hogwarts that makes it feel alive. These portraits are history on the walls, but not silent history. They speak, they argue, they protect. Their magic isn't flashy, but it's deep. Each one is a whisper from the past, waiting to be heard by those who know to listen. Number 11. Hogwarts wasn't always safe. Hogwarts may feel like a sanctuary in the films, but the books reveal a much darker truth. Tragedy has always walked the corridors of the castle. One of the earliest deaths happened decades before Harry arrived, when a teenage girl named Myrtle Warren was killed in a bathroom. Her spirit remained behind, sobbing in the pipes as moaning Myrtle. She died looking into the eyes of a basilisk. That monster lived in the Chamber of Secrets. For years, accessible from inside the school itself, the school hosted horrors no child should face. During Harry's second year, students were found petrified, hanging like corpses in the halls. The danger was real, not imagined. Later, in the Goblet of Fire, the Triwizard Tournament brought death directly into the castle's heart. Cedric Diggory, a bright and brave student from Hufflepuff, was murdered on Hogwarts grounds. Voldemort returned that night, and the school's illusion of safety shattered. Dumbledore never lied about the risks. He warned the students in somber tones. In the Great Hall, under floating candles and carved pumpkins, he said, "Dark and difficult times lie ahead. Soon we must all face the choice between what is right and what is easy." His eyes, tired and old, carried the weight of history. The walls of Hogwarts had seen betrayal, blood, and war long before Harry's time. In the films, this darkness was softened. The shadows were pulled back. Hallways looked cleaner, brighter. The danger felt distant, more like a fantasy than a looming threat. But in the books, Hogwarts was never a fairy tale. It was a fortress, yes, but one constantly under siege. The safety there was never guaranteed. It had to be fought for every year, every chapter, every life. Number 12. Why don't students wear robes in the films? In the first two Harry Potter films, the students of Hogwarts walked the stone corridors wrapped in long black robes, their silhouettes echoing the magical traditions described in the books. But by the time the Order of the Phoenix arrived, something had changed. Robes vanished. Instead, we see Harry, Hermione and Ron in sweaters, collared shirts, and even jeans. The enchanted halls of Hogwarts began to look strangely like a modern British boarding school. In the books, robes are not optional. J.K. Rowling made it clear that wizards wear them daily. In The Philosopher's Stone, she writes, 3 people in long cloaks were standing there, and even in the wizarding world, wearing a cloak was not unusual. Hogwarts students don robes from their first year and wear them for lessons, meals, and official school events. The only time casual clothes are mentioned is during holidays or rare trips to Hogsmeade. The consistency of this costume is part of what makes the magical world feel complete and separate from the Muggle one. Yet the filmmakers had other priorities. As the actors aged and the tone grew darker, the producers pushed for realism. Director David Yates, who took over in the 5th film, chose to present the trio in street clothes to make them feel more grounded, more real to the audience. The logic was simple. If the characters looked like teenagers in our world, viewers would connect with their emotions more easily. But in doing so, something unique was lost. The constant reminder that these were not ordinary kids. Without robes, Hogwarts loses a layer of its charm. The uniformity of magical dress wasn't just about school rules, it was a symbol of identity. Each house had its coloured lining, each student, wrapped in the same black cloak, belonged to something ancient and unified. When Harry stood next to Draco in The Half-Blood Prince, both in cardigans, the stark contrast between Gryffindor and Slytherin dulled. The robes weren't just fabric, they were part of the spell. Number 13. Moving staircases are a daily nightmare. The enchanted staircases of Hogwarts are often remembered as charming quirks of the ancient castle. The films present them as wondrous and mysterious, a majestic ballet of shifting architecture. But in the books, these staircases are something much more intricate, frustrating, and often downright maddening. What the movies left out is that these moving staircases were not just a magical marvel, they were a logistical nightmare. For a student trying to get to class on time, they were an unpredictable adversary, especially for those who treasured punctuality, like Hermione Granger. There are over 100 staircases in Hogwarts. Some are wide and sweeping, grand enough to fit entire classes during rush hour. Others are narrow, creaky, and swaying slightly as if suspended by threads of magic and time. Some are hidden behind trick panels, while others appear only at certain times of the day. The real horror begins with their unpredictability. As stated in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, there were 142 staircases at Hogwarts, wide, sweeping ones, narrow, rickety ones, some that led somewhere different on a Friday, some with a vanishing step halfway up that you had to remember to jump. This wasn't mere eccentricity, this was a minefield. Hermione Granger, who meticulously planned her days down to the minute, must have found these staircases maddening. Although she rarely complained, the mere fact that she resorted to using a time turner in her 3rd year to attend all her classes shows how desperate the situation could become. The time turner was not just to allow her to attend overlapping classes, it was, in part, a way to outsmart Hogwarts itself. When the castle's architecture seems to fight your best intentions, time itself becomes your ally. For someone like Hermione, being 5 minutes late was not an option. Yet Hogwarts' staircases turned that goal into a Sisyphean task. The stairs often played tricks depending on the day, the mood of the castle, or even the foot with which a student started climbing. As described in the book, some simply vanished when you were halfway up, leading a hapless student to fall, shout, or grab the nearest banister. On more than one occasion, Neville Longbottom found himself stranded mid-air, clutching a railing while his books scattered below. The castle, for all its grandeur, seemed to enjoy punishing those who failed to memorize its oddities. Neville once arrived 20 minutes late to a charms lesson because the staircase he usually took to the 4th floor turned into a flat slide and deposited him back where he started. It wasn't just about missing class. The castle's staircases introduced an element of psychological stress that is often overlooked. A first-year student, already overwhelmed by ghosts, shifting portraits, and enchanted ceilings, now had to memorize an ever-changing map of vertical traps. The Marauder's map may have been designed for sneaking around, but for students like Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas, it became a necessity for basic navigation. Without it, one risked ending up on the wrong floor, locked out of a corridor, or worse, stuck in a staircase that looped back onto itself endlessly, as one reportedly did near the divination tower. One staircase in particular, leading to the Astronomy tower, was known for vanishing at midnight. Fred and George Weasley once bet Lee Jordan that he couldn't sneak up to the tower after hours. He nearly made it, but as he placed his foot on the top stair, the entire thing blinked out of existence, and he tumbled 2 stories into a tapestry that thankfully cushioned the fall. The staircases weren't just moving, they were sentient, or at least governed by chaotic rules that no adult seemed interested in explaining. Filch, the caretaker, knew the castle better than most. He avoided some staircases entirely, not because they were dangerous, but because they offended his rigid sense of order. In Chamber of Secrets, Filch's fury upon discovering students loitering near the East Wing was less about misbehavior and more about the frustration of navigating the east stairwell, which spun in a full circle if 2 students ascended side by side. "I think it's funny," he muttered, glaring at the steps as if they were old enemies. The professors, curiously, never offered much help. McGonagall would issue curt warnings. Don't dawdle near the 3rd floor's spiralling stair. But beyond that, survival was up to the students. The staircases became part of the unspoken curriculum. Learn to read the castle or be devoured by it. Ravenclaws treated this as a puzzle. Slytherins memorized secret paths, and Gryffindors, more often than not, resorted to blind courage and risk. Hufflepuffs, for their part, shared notes and schedules, creating elaborate diagrams in their common room that became outdated within days. Even the ghosts seemed cautious. Nearly, Headless Nick once glided through the stairwell leading to the dungeons, but disappeared when Peeves, the poltergeist, began rearranging the stair knobs and railing placements with a magical wrench. Peeves delighted in the chaos. "Stairs for the bold, traps for the sly, you step too late and say goodbye," he sang as he watched Ernie Macmillan walk directly into a vanished step and nearly lose his front teeth. It was said that Rowena Ravenclaw herself designed the initial magical blueprint for the shifting staircases. Intended as a test of wit and adaptability, the stairs were supposed to challenge students intellectually. But over the centuries, layers of additional enchantments, some malicious, some accidental, transformed them into the unpredictable entities they became. The castle was alive, and its staircases were its mood rings, flaring in annoyance or playfulness depending on the time of day or the students using them. Number 14, Hidden Rooms. Few students know about. The Hogwarts castle is alive. Its walls breathe with whispers of centuries, its corridors curve with intention, and its staircases lead not just to classrooms, but into the mysteries of the unknown. What the films failed to capture is not simply an omitted scene or a missing line of dialogue. It is an entire undercurrent of the unseen, the quiet, hidden, secret places that reveal Hogwarts to be less a school and more a sentient, shifting puzzle box. These are the places where magic lingers in silence. The first among these hidden spaces is a narrow broom closet Harry stumbles into during his 6th year. In The Half-Blood Prince, he hides from Snape in a little-used corridor behind a tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy and finds a tiny cupboard to duck into. It is described not as a simple storage room but as a forgotten crevice, dusty and cloaked in shadows. The fact that such a place exists unnoticed near the potions classroom tells us something essential. Hogwarts grows in corners. It builds its secrets vertically and horizontally, allowing tiny havens to sprout between the stones for those who need refuge, whether they are hiding from teachers, emotions, or something more dangerous. Luna Lovegood knows this better than most. She doesn't just inhabit Hogwarts, she listens to it. In Order of the Phoenix, she speaks casually of a room at the top of Ravenclaw Tower where she often spends time alone. This is no common room. It is a space separate from the dormitories, an observatory of sorts, quiet and haunting. The books do not linger here with long descriptions, but the silence between the words reveals everything. This tower is Luna's sanctuary, a place the castle itself may have shaped for a student who sees beyond what others see. It is never visited by Harry, nor Ron, nor even Hermione. It is secret in the purest sense, not because it is concealed, but because it is sacred. The bathroom of Moaning Myrtle is another such space, technically known but functionally ignored. In Chamber of Secrets, it becomes the epicenter of forbidden experimentation. It is here, in a cracked and dripping chamber bay of porcelain and misery, that Hermione brews Polyjuice Potion, bending school rules and risking exposure. Myrtle's moans distract most, but the room itself holds deeper meaning. The entrance to the Chamber of Secrets is hidden here. The films show the sinks sliding away, but they miss the quiet dread of discovering that an ancient secret lies just below the very floor students walk on daily. This is the horror and wonder of Hogwarts. It wears its past like hidden armor. Even within recognized spaces, layers of secrecy fester. Take the trophy room, for instance. To most, it is a dusty chamber filled with plaques and tarnished medals. But, as noted in Philosopher's Stone, it is also where Harry and Draco schedule their midnight duel, only to be chased off by Filch. Why there? Why this room? Because the trophy room, unlike classrooms, is mostly abandoned at night. Its windows are dark, its corners echo. It holds relics that no one remembers and histories that no one reads. One might say the ghosts of past students live here, trapped in brass nameplates and forgotten inscriptions. Beneath the castle lies the dungeons, a term so general it seems devoid of mystery. But the potions classroom, where Snape prowls like a bitter spectre, is only one part. In Goblet of Fire, Harry describes wandering past dungeon entrances he'd never noticed before. That plural is intentional. Dungeons, in the ancient sense, are not mere basements. They are prisons, torture chambers, crypts. Some may still be sealed, others may open only under the right moon or mood. The castle allows access when it chooses, and sometimes not even then. Filch's office is tucked into one of these corners, and while it's known, it feels deeply private, almost forbidden. Inside are chains and manacles, relics from an era when Hogwarts used cruel discipline. Filch keeps them polished, not just because he hopes to use them again, but because they connect him to something older, darker. His office is a museum of pain, hidden behind stone and silence. No student lingers here, no professor enters without a reason. It is a secret kept in plain sight. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry describes a narrow passage that leads from behind a statue of Gregory the Smarmy down into the dungeons. Fred and George Weasley know of it, of course. They map such things, but they don't build them. These tunnels existed before, placed like veins beneath the stone skin of the school. The Marauders only documented what was already alive. In this we understand a greater truth. The students may change, but Hogwarts does not forget. Its secrets stack upon each other like sediment. The Room of Requirement is the most famous of these hidden places, and yet even it holds untapped mystery. In Order of the Phoenix, it changes depending on the need of the one who seeks it. A bathroom, a training chamber, a hiding place. But in Deathly Hallows, it becomes a battlefield, a maze of accumulated objects from centuries of hidden things. The Room of Lost Things, as described, is staggering in scale. Broken vanishing cabinets, cursed tiaras, forgotten textbooks, and possibly even dangerous artifacts lie abandoned here. It is a graveyard of secrets. But what of rooms not even named? Dumbledore, in Chamber of Secrets, tells Harry that help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it. He doesn't mean just from teachers, he means the castle itself responds. In Goblet of Fire, a staircase moves when Harry is late for divination, leading him directly to the tower. Coincidence? Not likely. The movement of the architecture suggests intelligence. Rooms may appear only once, perhaps only for one person. A hallway may stretch longer for someone trying to delay. Time itself bends within Hogwarts. Number 15. The strange Hogwarts grading system. In the hushed corridors of Hogwarts Castle, nestled deep within the Scottish Highlands, there exists a truth about magical education that eludes even the most observant viewers of the films. While the shifting staircases, the secret passageways, and the enchanted feasts dazzle the eyes, one crucial element of Hogwarts life remains largely unexplored on screen: the way students are assessed. Unlike the Muggle world, where grades come in neat packages, A's and B's or 5s and 4s, Hogwarts uses a far more nuanced system. Not based on numbers or percentages, this unique evaluation method favors a broader philosophical view of learning, and this detail, quietly woven into the fabric of the books, offers a powerful insight into how magic itself is taught and understood. Hogwarts' grading system is not concerned with precision, but with perception. It reflects the wizarding world's preference for intuition over analytics, character over calculation. Students are not ranked against one another by decimals and GPA points. They are given marks in words, judgments more qualitative than quantitative, more suggestive than definitive. Outstanding, exceeds expectations, and acceptable are the passing grades, while poor, dreadful, and the infamous troll indicate failure. These are not mere labels, they are reflections of a student's grasp of magical principles, their creative thinking, and at times their emotional maturity. This method of grading is a deliberate choice, emblematic of a world where rigid logic rarely holds sway for long. The films, for all their visual splendor, rarely show students receiving grades at all, much less delve into the meanings behind them. Yet in the books, grades serve as milestones in the characters' academic lives. They mark growth, frustration, hope, and disappointment. When Harry Potter sits for his OWLs, ordinary wizarding levels, his experience is painted with detail and anxiety. These are not just tests, they are rites of passage. And the results? Not numbers, but verdicts. Harry had received Astronomy A, Care of Magical Creatures E, Charms E, Defense Against the Dark Arts O. The moment is deeply personal. These grades say more than digits ever could. They tell us that Harry, despite chaos and trauma, managed to rise above expectations in key subjects. They also reveal where his strengths lie, his natural flair for defense against the dark arts, his growing precision in charms. For Hermione Granger, the grades are a mirror of her relentless discipline. She earns 10 outstanding marks, and 1 exceeds expectations in defense against the dark arts. Even this 1E is a source of personal frustration for her. Her ambition, her near perfection, and the rare crack in her academic armor speak volumes about who she is. In contrast, Ron Weasley's results are more modest. His twin brothers mockingly predict that he'll be happy just to get 3 owls and a troll. When he manages a respectable tally, it's more than academic. It's validation for a boy forever in the shadow of others. The grading system allows for such subtleties, something a number or letter could never quite convey. Then there's Neville Longbottom. Early in the series, Neville is portrayed as clumsy, timid, and often forgetful. But when he receives and exceeds expectations in herbology, it isn't just a passing remark, it's a breakthrough. Professor Sprout has long seen potential in Neville, and this grade affirms his hidden talents. It's a spark in the boy who would one day pull the sword of Gryffindor from the sorting hat. The word exceeds expectations is a quiet prophecy, an indication that greatness lies not in brilliance, but in resilience. The unique labels also have psychological weight. An acceptable may suggest mediocrity, but in a subject like potions under the strict Severus Snape, it might as well be a minor miracle. A dreadful might sting, but it's not the same as a numerical 0. It carries emotional implications, a call to do better rather than a numerical condemnation. And troll, the lowest mark, is more than a failing grade. It is a statement. It suggests complete incompetence, a failure so profound it borders on mythical mockery. Such a grade is rarely seen but always feared, and the threat of it hangs like a spectre over underprepared students. This word-based system also reveals the subjectivity involved in magical instruction. Not every teacher grades with the same hand. Snape is known for his brutal assessments and near impossibility of achieving an outstanding. In contrast, Professor Flitwick, kind-hearted and fair, is more generous. The grading reflects not just the student's performance but also the temperament of the teacher. Magic, after all, is as much art as science, and its evaluation cannot be reduced to cold calculation. In this way, Hogwarts becomes a living institution, its human inconsistencies shaping the arc of every student's academic journey. The absence of a rigid scale also means that students must internalize a deeper understanding of their progress. They cannot obsess over whether they got an 88% or a 91%. Instead, they must grapple with the meaning behind their evaluation. To get an exceeds expectations means to reflect on what was missed, how one might stretch toward an outstanding. It encourages growth over comparison. This approach aligns with the very nature of magic, a force that thrives on imagination, flexibility, and soul. Fred and George Weasley are perhaps the greatest champions of this flexible system. They perform poorly on their OWLs, yet they go on to build one of the most successful businesses in Diagon Alley. Their story is a reminder that grades at Hogwarts are not the sole measure of talent. As Dumbledore himself wisely observes, it is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. The grading system at Hogwarts does not lock students into lifelong tracks based on arbitrary scores. It is open-ended, allowing for change, for redemption, for surprise. Another fascinating aspect is that not all subjects are graded. Subjects like divination, care of magical creatures, or astronomy are not always given the same weight as core subjects like transfiguration or potions. This further reinforces the idea that wizarding education is holistic and not entirely standardized. Even the OWLs and NEWTs, the major standardized tests in the wizarding world, are administered only at certain points in a student's education, and even then, their influence is limited to specific career paths, such as aura training or healer apprenticeships. Number 16, the forgotten Hogwarts school song. Of all the moments lost in translation from page to screen, perhaps none speaks more to the heart of Hogwarts than the omission of the school song. It's not a grand spell or a pivotal duel. It's not a prophecy, a betrayal, or a hidden corridor. It is, instead, a single scene during the first-year feast in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, barely a few pages long and yet bursting with the odd, enchanting warmth that defines J.K. Rowling's world. And in its brief appearance it says more about Hogwarts than a dozen sweeping shots of the castle's towers. The school song, performed once and never again, is Hogwarts in its purest form, silly, heartfelt, deeply personal, and utterly magical. When the first years enter the Great Hall, wide-eyed and trembling, the moment is dominated by sorting and ceremony. But after the last student places the sorting hat back on its stool, Dumbledore rises to speak. He delivers a speech, short and odd as always, that includes his famously nonsensical words, nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak, and then with twinkling eyes and a wave of his wand, he commands the appearance of a golden ribbon floating through the air. Upon this ribbon, the lyrics to the Hogwarts school song are spelled out, letter by shimmering letter. "Everyone pick their favourite tune," Dumbledore instructs cheerfully, "and off we go." And off they go indeed. The students of Hogwarts, a mix of seasoned wizards and new arrivals, raise their voices in the most chaotic chorus imaginable. Some choose fast melodies, others slow, some shout, some hum. The book tells us that two Weasley twins finish their rendition in a brisk tempo, while a small boy from Slytherin chooses to sing it as a funeral dirge. By the time he's done, the hall is silent. And then comes Dumbledore's reaction. Quiet, genuine, unforgettable. He wipes his eyes and says, "Ah, music, a magic beyond all we do here." It's this moment, brief as it is, that reveals so much about the school and its headmaster. The song itself is charmingly clumsy. Its lyrics, which begin with "Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Hoggy-Warty Hogwarts, teach us something, please," are hardly sophisticated. They verge on ridiculous, but that's the point. In a castle filled with stern portraits, dangerous secrets, and ancient traditions, there is a space for playful absurdity. And more than that, there is space for individual expression. That is what the film adaptations miss. In their quest for cinematic grandeur, they flatten this curious bit of school life into non-existence. The school song is not about music. It's about letting children be who they are, even in a world where wands and dragons exist. It's about a school that welcomes the strange and the eccentric, the serious and the silly, all under one enchanted roof. Dumbledore, who is perhaps the strangest of them all, knows this better than anyone. That's why he lets the song unfold in such a wild, unstructured way. Every student picks their melody. Every voice is heard, no matter how off-key. And in that moment, Hogwarts is more than a school. It's a sanctuary for the soul. The absence of this detail in the films might seem trivial, but it's symbolic of something greater. The movies often emphasize the grandeur and danger of Hogwarts, the moving staircases, the Quidditch games, the battles fought in its courtyards, but they forget the peculiar magic of Dumbledore's world, the way he mixes whimsy with wisdom, play with power. The school song is pure Dumbledore. Its inclusion in the book and exclusion from the films marks a shift in tone, a turning away from the absurd and toward the serious. Take, for example, the way the first feast plays out in the movie. The Sorting Hat sings, the students are sorted, and then Dumbledore gives a short address. There is no ribbon of golden letters, no mismatched melodies, no laughter that slowly fades as the funeral dirge winds down. The moment is efficient, elegant, and sterile. It tells us that Hogwarts is an institution. But the book tells us something else, that it is a living, breathing thing, a place that thrives not in perfection, but in personality. The fact that Dumbledore cries at the end of the song is essential. It is one of the earliest glimpses we get of his emotional depth. He is not just a wise old wizard, he is a man who understands the fragile beauty of moments like this. The ridiculous song, sung in discordant voices, moves him to tears. That speaks volumes about who he is, and it offers a hint to the reader that beneath his eccentricity lies a profound understanding of what makes life worth living, connection, joy, and a touch of foolishness. It's worth noting that the song itself never returns in the books. It is mentioned again in passing, but never performed. That's part of what makes it so powerful. It is a singular event, a flash of pure Hogwarts spirit never repeated. In that way, it mirrors the fleeting nature of childhood itself. The first time at Hogwarts is never repeated. The first feast, the first song, the first glimpse of floating candles and enchanted ceilings, these things belong to the beginning. And like the song, they linger only in memory. Fred and George, of course, race through the lyrics with glee. Their chosen melody is quick and mischievous, a reflection of their characters. The boy who sings the funeral march, unnamed in the book but memorable nonetheless, makes a different choice. And Dumbledore lets him. That's the genius of it. No one is told to sing in unison. No one is corrected or laughed at. Hogwarts is not a place where uniformity is prized above individuality, quite the opposite. It is a place where differences are celebrated, even sung aloud. This moment also foreshadows a deeper truth about Dumbledore's educational philosophy. He believes that magic is not just in spells and potions, but in laughter, in art, in song. When he says, "music, a magic beyond all we do here," he means it. He has seen great acts of wizardry, both beautiful and terrible, but in this chorus of clashing melodies, He hears something truer than any incantation. He hears childhood. He hears hope. In a way, the school song is the anti-anthem. Most school songs are designed to unify. They are martial, proud, intended to bring everyone together in a single voice. But the Hogwarts song does the opposite. It allows for chaos, for contradiction, for cacophony. And yet somehow, in its own strange way, it does unify. Not by forcing everyone into one mold, but by letting everyone be heard. That's a kind of unity too, one built on mutual acceptance rather than conformity. The melody that each student chooses becomes a kind of self-portrait. A bold Gryffindor might belt it out like a victory march. A dreamy Ravenclaw might turn it into a lullaby. A sombre Slytherin, as we've seen, might sing it like a hymn for the dead. And still they are all singing the same words. That's the heart of Hogwarts. Shared values, different voices. It's why 4 houses can still be one school. Imagine if this scene had been brought to life on screen. Picture the candlelit hall, the floating ribbon, the rising tide of sound as every student begins their own melody. The camera would sweep from face to face, Neville singing quietly to himself, Draco smirking as he deliberately chooses an ominous tune, Hermione mouthing the words in perfect rhythm, unsure whether to join in, and Dumbledore seated at the high table, eyes glistening behind his half-moon spectacles. That would have been a moment of cinema unlike any other, but it never came. The films chose spectacle over spirit. That is their right. And to be fair, they did capture many of the book's emotional highs, but they missed this one. Perhaps they feared the scene would seem silly on screen. Perhaps they worried it would undercut the sense of majesty. But Hogwarts has never been about majesty. It has been about magic, and magic is often strange. Even the lyrics themselves are telling. They ask the school to teach something, please, and to do so without boring the students. They are written from a child's perspective, not an adult's. They are silly and sincere, equal parts nonsense and need. And that's what Hogwarts is to its students. A place that understands their longing to be amazed, their desire to belong. In the end, the school song is not just a detail, it is a declaration. It says that at Hogwarts, you are allowed to be odd. You are allowed to laugh. You are allowed to be yourself. That's not a message the films often convey. They show us danger and destiny, but rarely delight. The school song, for all its ridiculousness, reminds us why Hogwarts matters. This is not to say that the films failed. They brought the world of Harry Potter to life for millions. But they missed this song, and in missing it, they lost a part of Dumbledore. The part that loves laughter, the part that cries at discordant melodies, the part that believes magic lives in music, in children's voices, in silliness shared. For those who know only the movies, the absence is invisible, but for readers, it's a whole shaped like a ribbon of golden letters and a roomful of clashing songs. It's a whisper from the page that says, "We were more than you saw," and that whisper lingers, even as the final note fades. Number 17, class schedule, a real challenge for students. Of all the things the Harry Potter films omitted, the sheer complexity and chaos of Hogwarts' class schedule remains one of the most underappreciated losses. In the books, J.K. Rowling painted Hogwarts not just as a castle of wonder and danger, but as a functioning school where magical knowledge was earned, often through grueling logistics as much as intellectual effort. The daily routine of a student wasn't the relaxed, whimsical stroll. Through enchanted halls shown in the films, it was a demanding dance through rotating staircases, distant courtyards, underground chambers, and even across the Hogwarts grounds. And for some students, like Hermione Granger, it meant manipulating time itself to keep up. Hermione's third year was the most telling example. Determined to study everything Hogwarts had to offer, she enrolled in far more subjects than any normal schedule could accommodate. It wasn't just a matter of taking on more homework, though that was part of the burden. It was the physical impossibility of being in 2 classrooms at once. To resolve this, Professor McGonagall entrusted Hermione with a time turner, a magical device that allowed her to travel back in time by increments of hours. The responsibility was enormous, the risk palpable, and the effect on Hermione profound. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Rowling wrote, "Hermione had as many as 12 classes a day. She walked around in a sort of daze, clutching a huge pile of books, talking very fast and rarely sleeping." This was not whimsical magic. This was the reality of academic ambition in a school where the corridors might shift beneath your feet and where charms could be on the 3rd floor at 10, followed by care of magical creatures at the edge of the Forbidden Forest 15 minutes later. The films never showed the harried expressions, the frantic rushes between classes, or the tight clusters of students consulting their timetables like lifelines. They never showed Ron Weasley sighing in relief when Defense Against the Dark Arts and potions were in adjacent wings. They never showed Neville Longbottom panting as he sprinted up from the greenhouses to the Astronomy Tower, only to arrive late and flustered. The sheer geography of Hogwarts played a key role in these challenges. While subjects like history of magic took place in relatively accessible classrooms, others were scattered across the campus. Potions, led by the intimidating Professor Snape, was conducted in the dungeons, a cold, damp labyrinth beneath the main floors. Herbology required students to don protective gloves and trudge out to the greenhouses, often across muddy lawns in the rain. Care of magical creatures, particularly in Hagrid's tenure, involved venturing into uncertain terrain, sometimes brushing against the borders of the Forbidden Forest. Each movement from one class to another was an expedition. As Rowling described in The Goblet of Fire, it was a relief to get outside for care of magical creatures after being in the dungeons for potions. The damp chill still clung to Harry's robes. There was no indication in the films that these transitions could be a source of daily stress. Students weren't teleporting from scene to scene, though cinematic convenience made it seem so. In reality, navigating Hogwarts required attention, stamina, and occasionally luck. The castle itself was a living entity with staircases that moved, doors that required passwords or tricks, and ghosts who occasionally offered helpful or misleading advice. Peeves, the poltergeist, could sabotage a student's punctuality in seconds by upending an ink bottle or blocking a passageway with a barricade of chairs. In The Half-Blood Prince, Harry reflects on how complicated his schedule has become with the addition of private lessons with Dumbledore, Quidditch practice, and regular classes. His days are so tightly packed that even finding time for homework becomes a puzzle. Rowling doesn't romanticize the workload. She presents it as real and sometimes exhausting. Harry spent so much time these days studying advanced potion making that he felt as though he might start brewing polyjuice in his sleep, she wrote. It's a detail that grounds the magical world in real adolescent experience, overwork, sleep deprivation, and the endless balancing act between passion and pressure. The uniqueness of magical education added further difficulties. For example, divination wasn't taught in a regular classroom, but in a sweltering attic-like room accessed by a ladder. Astronomy required late-night lessons under the stars, where students were expected to chart constellations while braving chilly night air. Arithmancy and ancient runes, often seen as the more scholarly disciplines, demanded mental rigor that often left Hermione visibly exhausted. And then there were elective subjects like Muggle studies and apparition, the latter only offered to students over 17 and practiced under the watchful eye of ministry officials. Even meal times could become problematic. The time between the last class of the day and dinner was often consumed by sprints to the dormitory, frantic uniform changes, or desperately trying to get a head start on homework. For Hermione, Ron, and Harry, these moments of respite were rare. The common room became less a place of relaxation and more of a war zone of parchment, open books, and whispered complaints about Professor Binns' endless lectures. The film's choice to flatten this aspect of Hogwarts robbed viewers of an essential truth about the school, that learning magic was not easy, and it wasn't meant to be. It demanded not only intellect, but endurance. The absence of scenes showing exhausted students collapsing into armchairs or yawning through late-night reading left out a layer of realism that made Hogwarts feel so much more relatable in the books. Every student, regardless of bloodline or background, had to fight through the same grind. And the difficulty wasn't limited to the physical or intellectual. There was the social challenge of classes too. Being sorted into houses meant that most classes were taken with rival houses. For Gryffindors, this often meant sharing potions with the Slytherins, a setup that made even simple instruction a battle of nerves. Snape's blatant favoritism toward his own house was no secret. "You don't even try to be fair," Hermione once accused him, and she wasn't wrong. For students like Neville, just surviving a double period with Snape without melting his cauldron was considered a triumph. Even professors had differing expectations and teaching styles. Professor McGonagall's transfiguration lessons were strict and precise, often involving practical magic that could go dangerously wrong. Flitwick's charms classes, while cheerier, still required concentration and discipline. There were essays to be written, spells to be memorized, and theory to be understood. Failing to grasp the basics could have immediate and embarrassing consequences. In Chamber of Secrets, Seamus Finnegan manages to set his eyebrows on fire more than once in Charms, much to the class's amusement and Flitwick's dismay. The omnipresent demand for academic excellence combined with the unpredictability of the castle meant that being on time required careful planning. Hermione, of course, mastered this at great cost to her well-being, but others weren't so lucky. The Marauder's map became a critical tool for Harry, not just in sneaking around, but in locating shortcuts and avoiding obstacles. Without it, he might have failed to make it to certain classes at all, especially during the period when Filch was actively hunting him down after late-night adventures. What the books captured so well and the films ignored was that Hogwarts was designed to test its students, not only through exams and essays, but through daily endurance, multitasking, and mental flexibility. Time was never on the student's side. The third-year time turner plot wasn't a fantasy gimmick. It was a symbol of Hermione's desperation to learn everything, even if it broke her in the process. Her eventual return to a normal schedule wasn't just for safety, it was an act of self-preservation. This detail deepened our understanding of Hogwarts. It wasn't just a school with moving staircases and magic portraits, it was an obstacle course of learning. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry's fifth year becomes almost unbearable. With the added weight of OWL exams, endless detentions with Umbridge, and the looming threat of Voldemort's return, his schedule becomes suffocating. Rowling wrote, "He was so tired he felt as though he were carrying several heavy books in his head all the time." The combination of physical fatigue and mental stress was vividly real, and it made Harry's growth as a wizard feel earned, not given. The reality of magical education is beautifully paradoxical. In a world where wands can levitate objects and creatures can vanish with a puff, students are still bound by very human limits: time, space, exhaustion, and fear. Hogwarts doesn't ease those burdens, it magnifies them. Each class isn't just a lesson, it's a trial. Each subject demands not only knowledge but resilience. You don't just learn spells, you learn how to keep moving when you're drenched from herbology and late for ancient runes. You learn how to hold your nerve when Snape is breathing down your neck in potions, and your potion is turning orange instead of green. For Hermione, and for readers who saw themselves in her, the pressure of the timetable wasn't just a narrative device, it was emotional truth. The desire to excel, the panic of failure, the inability to be everywhere at once, all of it rang true. The time turner wasn't just a magical object, it was a metaphor for the crushing burden of high expectations. When she finally snapped at divination, storming out and quitting the subject, it wasn't about Trelawney's nonsense. It was about reclaiming control over her overloaded life. If the films had shown us just one scene of Hermione setting her watch to spin, dashing breathlessly between two doors in a single minute, or collapsing into a chair in the common room, surrounded by books and on the verge of tears, the world might have understood Hogwarts differently. they would have seen that magic, like education, is a struggle, a journey through long corridors, endless flights of stairs, and the silent ticking of a clock that never grants you enough hours in the day. Number 18, bathrooms with a magical past. In the shadowed corridors of Hogwarts, where portraits whisper secrets and staircases shift like restless spirits, there exists a layer of reality entirely ignored by the films. Amid the grandeur of feasts in the Great Hall and the tension of Quidditch matches, the films chose not to linger on one of the strangest, most human aspects of the magical castle, its bathrooms. Yet within the books and the extended canon from J.K. Rowling herself, the toilet system of Hogwarts reveals a bizarre, ancient, and magical infrastructure that tells us far more about wizarding history than one might expect from such an unglamorous subject. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, a key plot point depends on the location of a bathroom. The entrance to the legendary Chamber of Secrets is hidden inside a girl's bathroom, one haunted by the miserable ghost of a former student, Moaning Myrtle. This is not just a narrative convenience, it's a powerful hint. The placement of such a significant magical passage inside a bathroom suggests that these facilities at Hogwarts are far more than places of routine necessity. They are, in fact, woven into the magical fabric of the school itself. The sink where Myrtle resides conceals an enchanted mechanism that reacts to Parseltongue, the serpent language, and opens a path into the dark underbelly of the school. In this way, the very architecture of Hogwarts assigns magical purpose to what should be the most mundane of locations. The detail of the bathroom sink is not accidental. Rowling wrote, "The tap with the tiny snake engraved on it had never worked." This is not just description, it's a clue. The tap's inoperability is directly linked to its true function. It is not plumbing, but a key. The notion that a bathroom fixture serves as a portal speaks volumes about how Hogwarts conceals and integrates ancient systems into modern-day facades. The films show the sink, but they treat it as a spooky gimmick, ignoring the broader implications about how magic and infrastructure coexist in the wizarding world. Most viewers of the films assume Hogwarts bathrooms are no different from Muggle facilities. After all, the scenes show stalls, faucets, tiled floors, things anyone would recognize. But Rowling's writings outside the core books reveal a very different story. In a post on the official Wizarding World website, formerly Pottermore, Rowling shared that prior to the 17th century, witches and wizards relieved themselves wherever they stood and simply vanished the evidence. Hogwarts did not always have bathrooms, she explained. Before adopting Muggle plumbing methods in the 18th century, witches and wizards simply relieved themselves wherever they stood and vanished the evidence with a spell. The detail borders on absurd, but it's deeply revealing. This casual vanishing spell, so blithely mentioned, implies a society where bodily functions were handled with magic to such an extent that physical waste systems were considered unnecessary. That worldview, in turn, sheds light on a major cultural divide between Muggles and magical folk. In a world where spellwork solves even the most intimate problems, the need for physical infrastructure like pipes, drains, or sewers is almost alien. When Hogwarts eventually installed modern plumbing, it wasn't to introduce a new standard, it was to conform to a Muggle idea of order. The implication here is fascinating. The magical world sometimes evolves not because of innovation, but because of necessity to coexist or adapt. The magical transformation of Hogwarts hygiene practices likely began during the era of Headmaster Eldritch Diggory, who served in the 18th century and was known for his progressive ideas. Though he is not directly tied to the plumbing renovations, the timeline fits. This period marked an era of reform and modernization in both magical and Muggle Britain. Installing bathrooms in Hogwarts would have been an enormous undertaking, not just architecturally, but magically, reworking centuries of spells and enchantments. The question is not just why they did it, but how. How does one retrofit plumbing into a building whose very walls resist consistency? The architecture of Hogwarts is notoriously sentient in its own fashion. Staircases move, doorways appear or vanish, rooms change purpose based on need. To install a fixed and functioning plumbing system would have required either coercing the castle to cooperate or enchanting the system to adapt. One can imagine that the toilets themselves are semi-magical beings, operating within a framework of spells that prevent overflow, maintain hygiene, and ensure privacy even when the castle walls decide to shift at whim. These are not ordinary fixtures, they are magical artifacts disguised as porcelain. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, a curious incident gives further weight to the idea that bathrooms are more than they seem. After Draco Malfoy uses the Room of Requirement to work on repairing the vanishing cabinet, he is seen spending inordinate amounts of time inside a bathroom. At first glance, it appears to be a red herring or a moody teenager's refuge. But Draco is not simply avoiding others. He's chosen that location for its seclusion, and perhaps because of what it hides. The bathroom becomes a stage for one of the most emotional confrontations in the series, the duel between Harry and Draco, ending in the use of Sectum Sempra. Here again, a bathroom is not just a setting, it is a crucible for secrets, violence, and transformation. These repeated appearances of bathrooms in key plot events cannot be dismissed as coincidence. They point to a narrative pattern and a world-building choice. Rowling deliberately places magical events in these locations to draw attention to the hidden nature of Hogwarts' internal systems. The bathroom is a threshold, a liminal space, both physically and magically. It stands between public and private, mundane and mystical. What the films gloss over is the sheer strangeness of these systems. In the books, we encounter scenes where toilets are connected to magical phenomena. Fred and George Weasley, for example, make frequent jokes about toilet seat stealing from their first year. It's a running gag, but one rooted in an old tradition. Bathrooms are where odd magic happens. Peeves, the poltergeist, almost completely erased from the movies, is frequently seen causing havoc in or near the bathrooms. He dumps water, hurls objects, and sets magical traps, all in these supposedly banal places. His obsession with bathrooms underscores how these spaces are tied to chaos and subversion. Even the prefect's bathroom, introduced in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, reveals the intersection of comfort, magic, and secrecy. Described with opulence that rivals any magical chamber, the room features a massive pool-like tub with dozens of taps, each dispensing different coloured bubbles, scented foams, or enchanted effects. The scene in which Harry solves the clue inside his golden egg takes place in a space that is both sanctuary and puzzle box. Myrtle returns in this scene, further cementing her role as the ghostly guardian of lavatorial secrets. The films touch on this moment, but never communicate the surreal magic of the room or the idea that bathrooms in Hogwarts can be portals to discovery. Then there's the curious connection between plumbing and magical transportation. The Ministry of Magic famously uses toilet bowls as entry points into its headquarters. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Harry, Ron, and Hermione infiltrate the Ministry using Polyjuice Potion and enter through enchanted toilets. These are not simply grotesque gags, they're part of a larger system. Magical society has integrated plumbing and travel, hygiene and enchantment. Toilets are not separate from magic, they are conduits of it. This thematic consistency, from the Chamber of Secrets to the Ministry's loo-based apparition system, hints at a broader magical logic. In the wizarding world, every part of the physical world has magical potential. No object is too humble to be repurposed as a portal, a trap, or a hiding place. Hogwarts plumbing, with its hidden chambers and sentient fixtures, becomes a metaphor for the school itself, an ancient structure full of secrets where even the pipes might whisper if you listen closely. Rowling's attention to these details isn't just world-building, it's a nod to the magical realism of her universe. She takes the everyday and bends it. A tap becomes a key, a stool becomes a tunnel, a bath becomes an oracle, and by placing these transformations in bathrooms, spaces traditionally ignored in fantasy literature, she signals that magic is not reserved for high towers or sacred altars. It exists wherever there are walls and water, ghosts and grumbling pipes. One might imagine that the first generation of Hogwarts students post-plumbing had difficulty adjusting. Wizards who were used to vanishing spells would likely have seen toilets as curious, even suspicious. Perhaps they mistrusted the idea of waste disappearing via pipe rather than wand. It's a culture clash embedded within bricks and mortar, and it likely wasn't just the students. Ghosts like the Bloody Baron and the Grey Lady, relics of earlier eras, may have viewed the new facilities with disdain. Even Hogwarts itself may have protested, shifting pipes, hiding valves, sending water flowing in the wrong direction just to maintain its authority. Lack of plumbing before the 18th century also reframes the mystery of the Chamber of Secrets. Salazar Slytherin, who built it 1,000 years prior, would never have designed the entrance to be located in a sink. The entrance must have been hidden elsewhere, perhaps behind a magical curtain or disguised by illusion. When plumbing was introduced, it likely disturbed the original architecture, and a clever enchantment integrated the sink as a new gateway. This accident of modernization became the perfect disguise. Who would suspect a faucet, especially one that didn't work? This blend of old and new, ancient spellwork hidden beneath Muggle inventions is one of the richest veins in Rowling's world building. It speaks to a magical society constantly in negotiation with itself, between tradition and change, secrecy and adaptation. The toilets of Hogwarts, ridiculous as it may sound, are emblems of that tension. By ignoring this aspect entirely, the films miss an opportunity not just for comic relief, but for deepening the magical realism that makes the book so immersive. They trade the bizarre for the familiar, offering tiled stalls instead of ancient mechanisms, and flushing away centuries of wizarding eccentricity. The loss is not minor. It erases an entire layer of magic. It is in these small, absurd, and slightly comical corners of the wizarding world that Rowling's genius is most visible. Not in the great battles or dramatic reveals, but in the realization that a toilet can hide a serpent's lair, a bath can help decode a song, and a ghost can guard both secrets and sinks. The magic of Hogwarts isn't just in its towers or its books, it's in its pipes, and that is a truth the films were too tidy to tell. Number 19, Potions. Class is seriously dangerous. The dungeons of Hogwarts were cold, damp, and dimly lit, and yet it was in these unfriendly corridors that one of the most volatile and dangerous subjects in the entire school was taught. Potions, not charms, not transfiguration, and certainly not defense against the dark arts, though each had their own perils. No, it was here, hunched over simmering cauldrons and ingredients as delicate as lacewing flies and as vicious as murtlap tentacles, that Hogwarts students truly risked bodily harm. The films treated it as atmospheric and mysterious, a class where Professor Snape sneered and students stirred without consequences. But the books told a far grimmer story. Potion making was fraught with danger, unpredictability, and outcomes far worse than detentions. From the very first book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, readers are introduced to potions not as a mere academic subject, but as a demanding discipline akin to alchemy. In Snape's own words, it is the subtle science and exact art of potion making. He describes it not with joy, but with solemnity. It's not merely about following instructions, it's about precision. One extra clockwise stir, one incorrectly diced root, and the entire classroom could end up coated in acid or gasping for breath. The movies showed vials glowing and students quietly taking notes, but the reality in the books was far more explosive, sometimes literally. Take, for instance, the case of Seamus Finnegan. His name becomes almost a running gag in the movies as the boy whose spells and potions go awry in a puff of smoke. But in the books, these accidents have consequences. In the Chamber of Secrets, it's noted that Seamus managed to melt a cauldron through the bottom. The incident isn't played for laughs, it's recorded as one of a record number of cauldrons melted by the second years, which prompts Snape to scathingly compare them to a class of trolls. The explosion damaged more than equipment. It endangered everyone in a radius of a few feet. The text doesn't state it outright, but one can imagine the risk of flying metal, boiling liquid, and toxic fumes. Cauldrons exploding in the classroom were not uncommon. Neville Longbottom, in particular, had a notorious reputation for disaster. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, he managed to blow up his cauldron when making a shrinking solution. The result? A greenish smoke that filled the room, with Snape dragging Neville away and giving his ruined potion to Hermione for a demonstration of what it should have looked like. Again, the film adaptation glosses over this. In the book, however, the smell of singed hair and the visible panic among students made it clear that this was not a mistake one could simply laugh off. And what about the effect of potions gone wrong? In Half-Blood Prince, the story takes a darker turn. When Ron mistakenly drinks poisoned mead intended for Dumbledore, he collapses, foaming at the mouth. Only the quick action of Harry, who forces a bezoar into Ron's mouth, saves his life. This is not a classroom error, it is a near-death experience that hinges on knowledge of antidotes, something only a skilled potion student might have known. Had Harry not remembered Snape's lesson about bezoars in first year, Ron would have died. No spell could have saved him. Even something as seemingly innocent as the love potion, which in the films is used more for comic relief, carries deadly potential. In Half-Blood Prince, Romilda Vane's attempt to spike Harry's chocolates with a love potion goes awry when Ron eats them. The potion drives him into a stupor, and the antidote, once again administered by Slughorn, is the only thing that prevents further harm. But immediately after, Ron drinks the poisoned mead. That single day illustrates how volatile and dangerous potions can be in unskilled or careless hands. Snape's severity, so often criticized in both the books and films, begins to make sense when you view potions through the lens of real danger. He wasn't just being cruel, he was enforcing discipline in a classroom where a moment's distraction could result in hospitalization, or worse. In Philosopher's Stone, Neville ends up in the hospital wing after a simple accident with a potion. The book describes how his potion exploded in his face, causing his ears to balloon grotesquely and his skin to erupt in boils. There is nothing funny about this injury. It required medical attention and left the entire class shaken. The film sanitized potions, removing the tension and the risk. In Chamber of Secrets, the scene where students make Polyjuice potion is relegated to a quick montage. In the book, the process takes over a month. The ingredients, lacewing flies, stewed for 21 days, leeches, powdered bicorn horn, are dangerous and difficult to handle. Hermione, Harry and Ron brew it in secret in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, with Hermione overseeing the process with fanatical diligence. And even then it goes horribly wrong. Hermione ends up in the hospital wing for weeks after mistakenly adding cat hair to her potion, transforming her partially into a feline. That mistake wasn't magical whimsy, it was a bioalchemical misfire that affected her body at the cellular level. The classroom itself was a battlefield of hidden hazards. Consider the way students were taught to handle ingredients. Boomslang skin, pufferfish eyes, and fluxweed had to be measured and treated precisely. In Order of the Phoenix, Snape deducts points from Harry for not slicing his ingredients finely enough. This isn't mere nitpicking. The way ingredients are prepared determines how the potion interacts. A coarsely sliced root could destabilize a mixture, creating unpredictable reactions. The risk was real. And when students ignored such instructions, as Fred and George often did in jest, the results were often comically downplayed in the films, but far more severe in the text. Felix Felicis, the so-called liquid luck, is another example of dangerous territory. It's described in Half-Blood Prince as a potion that is dangerous to make, and only a few drops are advised. Overuse leads to reckless behavior, and a poorly brewed dose can cause death, poisoning, or worse. Yet in the movie, the potion is glittering and inviting, its danger only briefly hinted at. The real risk lies not in its charm, but in its complexity. One error in brewing it could mean disaster. That's why Slughorn warns his class so sternly, and why Harry, winning the bottle, is treated with such awe. Amortentia, the most powerful love potion in existence, is even more concerning. Its addictive qualities are akin to a narcotic, and the idea that someone could be obsessed against their will reveals how deeply dangerous potions can be. Slughorn shows it to the class with theatrical flair, but the book underscores its manipulative horror. Voldemort himself is the result of such a potion. His mother, Merope Gaunt, used a love potion to ensnare Tom Riddle Sr., conceiving a child without true love. The moral implications are profound. Potions can bend will, alter minds, and create life under false pretenses. Snape's own background as a potions master is filled with nuance the films ignore. In Half-Blood Prince, his annotations in the advanced potion-making textbook showcase how even standard recipes can be dramatically improved or dangerously botched. Harry, using Snape's modifications, easily outperforms Hermione, who rigidly follows the textbook. This doesn't just prove Snape's genius, it reinforces the idea that potions is as much an art as it is a science. Every variation comes with risk. Without understanding the why behind each step, a student could inadvertently poison themselves or others. One of the clearest signs of how perilous potions can be comes from the use of Veritaserum. A few drops force complete truth-telling, but only if brewed properly. In Goblet of Fire, Snape warns that even an incorrectly stored sample can lose its potency or become toxic. The power to force confessions, control behavior, or manipulate justice lies in a single vial. That the Ministry regulates it strictly is no coincidence. Yet the films merely mention it in passing, ignoring its real implications. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore and Harry retrieve a potion from the Horcrux cave. The potion causes Dumbledore to experience intense hallucinations and unbearable pain. Though its exact composition is unknown, the book makes it clear that the potion is dark, corrupt, and deeply harmful. Harry is forced to make Dumbledore drink every drop, watching as his mentor begs, screams, and weeps. This is a harrowing moment, one of the most painful in the entire series, and it all stems from a single potion designed to protect a Horcrux. The scene is in the movie, but the emotional and physical agony Dumbledore endures is muted. In the Goblet of Fire, Barty Crouch Jr. uses Polyjuice Potion to impersonate Mad-Eye Moody for nearly a full year. The logistical effort, the precision required, and the consistency of dosage make this act one of the most terrifying uses of potions in the series. Crouch kidnaps the real Moody, brews complex potions in secret, and successfully manipulates students, staff, and even Dumbledore. That level of deception would not be possible with just a glamour spell. It required mastery of potions and the nerve to handle something that could, if even slightly mismanaged, blow the whole operation. Even minor potions carried weight. In Order of the Phoenix, Madame Pomfrey gives various healing potions to students injured in the Department of Mysteries. These aren't sips of magical soup. They're carefully calibrated doses, often bitter and painful to take, made from substances like dittany and essence of myrtlap. Healing in the wizarding world is not as simple as waving a wand. It is the art of chemistry, precision, and often pain. The ultimate tragedy is that the classroom experience of potions could have been one of the most compelling elements in the films. The slow stirrings, the whispered instructions, the faint sizzle when a potion begins to thicken or glow, these moments could have built unbearable tension. Instead, they were treated like filler, missing the truth that in potions every class was a battle against the unknown. Hermione's excellence, Snape's vigilance, Neville's fear, each told a story the screen never fully honored. Potions were a reflection of control over one's hands, ingredients, and mind. As Slughorn once said, only the most powerful love potions smell differently to each person. according to what attracts them. That subtle line revealed something profound. Potions are deeply personal, dangerous, and evocative. They tap into emotion, biology, and psychology. They're not just magical chemistry, they're sorcery with stakes. The world of Hogwarts, in truth, wasn't built solely on bravery or spellcraft. It was sustained by the bubbling cauldrons in the dungeon, by students who measured, mixed, and risked their well-being daily. And the fact that so few accidents turned fatal is not a testament to the simplicity of the subject, but to the silent, intense pressure of mastering it. Number 20, the hospital wing has its own history. The hospital wing of Hogwarts was not merely a sterile hall tucked behind stone arches and enchanted doors. It was a sacred chamber of transition where pain turned into relief, chaos into order, and trauma into understanding. While the films offered the occasional glimpse of white sheets and the watchful gaze of Madame Pomfrey, they failed to capture the full essence of this quiet sanctuary. In the books it emerged not as a backdrop but as a living, beating heart of the castle, where the wounded were restored, secrets were protected, and sometimes memories themselves were put back together. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, after Harry's disastrous bludger injury during a Quidditch match, Gilderoy Lockhart, ever eager for attention, botched a simple healing charm and vanished all the bones from Harry's arm. What followed was a painful night of Scaligro, a potion that burned his throat like acid. The hospital wing wasn't just a place for recovery, it was a stage on which the consequences of magical incompetence unfolded with excruciating realism. While the films depicted Harry with a bandaged arm, they omitted the grotesque, painful process of regrowing bones, one of the many instances where magic didn't offer instant relief, but demanded endurance and strength. That same night, Colin Creevey was brought in, petrified, his camera strap still clutched in stone fingers, eyes wide and staring. He was one of many students paralyzed by the basilisk's gaze, and Madame Pomfrey tended to each one with tireless precision. The wing was transformed into a dormitory of statues, draped in white linen and kept under magical stasis. She never panicked. She moved between them like a priestess at a vigil, ensuring their preservation until a cure could be found. "They're not dead," she had said with firm assurance. "They've just been petrified." In The Prisoner of Azkaban, after the soul-ripping encounter with Dementors during a Quidditch match, Harry awoke in the hospital wing feeling drained, cold, and consumed by memories that weren't his choice to relive. It wasn't just physical damage that brought students to Madame Pomfrey's care. Dementors left emotional wounds deeper than broken bones. "You fainted," she told Harry firmly, silencing any attempt to downplay his suffering. She understood that pride often stood in the way of healing, and she dismantled it with motherly authority. Her presence was never condescending, it was commanding, precise, and deeply human. Even Ron, poisoned by a cursed bottle of mead in The Half-Blood Prince, was kept in the hospital wing under intensive care after Harry shoved a bezoar into his throat. Madame Pomfrey had not left his side for 3 days. The books emphasized this level of commitment. There was no rotating staff, no brief handovers. She was the constant, the immovable force. The film portrayed only a brief scene, but the novel made clear the gravity of Ron's situation and the depth of Pomfrey's dedication. In this wing, survival hinged not on drama but discipline. In Goblet of Fire, Harry spent an agonizing night in the hospital wing after the Triwizard Tournament, not just because of the injuries sustained in the maze, but because of the trauma of witnessing Cedric's death and the return of Voldemort. The physical pain was secondary to the emotional wreckage, and again, it was Madame Pomfrey who administered Dreamless Sleep Potion and guarded Harry's rest, fussing over him as though he were a child. The films bypassed this entirely. There was no portrayal of his raw grief, his haunted sleep, or her gentle insistence that he needed rest more than answers. When Katie Bell was cursed by a necklace in Half-Blood Prince, her body levitated, screaming and writhing. She was rushed to St. Mungo's, but her initial treatment began in the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey stabilized her with a quiet expertise. There was no spectacle, only swift action. Curses like these weren't common in the Muggle world. They required arcane knowledge and immediate intervention. The hospital wing became a triage center for arcane disaster, far more vital than the films ever acknowledged. In Order of the Phoenix, after the epic confrontation in the Department of Mysteries, the hospital wing took on the feel of a battlefield infirmary. Ron had been attacked by brains, Neville had a broken nose, Hermione was unconscious from a curse, Ginny's ankle was shattered, and Luna simply floated through the chaos, eerily calm. Every bed was occupied. Madame Pomfrey worked non-stop. Even Snape, cold and efficient, made rounds to provide specific antidotes. It was a collaborative effort, one of the few times rivalries were set aside for the sake of recovery. Dumbledore himself was once confined to the hospital wing, though briefly, after drinking the cursed potion in the Horcrux cave. When they returned to the Astronomy Tower, Madame Pomfrey was summoned, but even her skills had limits. She was no match for the damage Voldemort's magic could inflict. "I can do nothing for him," she whispered, a rare moment of defeat. The wing was a place of healing, yes, but it was also where the boundaries of magical medicine were made evident. In Philosopher's Stone, the hospital wing was also where Harry woke up after his first confrontation with Voldemort. There was a quiet dignity in how Madame Pomfrey guarded his bed from visitors until she deemed him strong enough. She had a sense for timing, when a student needed silence and when they needed company. Dumbledore waited until she gave her blessing. Even he deferred to her authority within those walls. In the film, the moment was rushed, but in the book, there was breathing room. Space to process. Space to talk. Space to reflect. The hospital wing wasn't limited to catastrophic injuries. It was where minor magical accidents were addressed too. Warts from backfired spells, boils from misbrewed potions, and transformations gone awry. Madame Pomfrey fixed up a student who had sprouted a second nose during transfiguration. These moments didn't make the film cut, but they built the reality of Hogwarts, a place where magic was unpredictable and consequences were real. The wing existed not only for drama, but for discipline, for care, for the mundane miracles of magical medicine. In the Chamber of Secrets, when Hermione was petrified and brought into the hospital wing, with a mirror clutched in her stiff hand, it wasn't just another casualty. It was a puzzle piece. Madame Pomfrey preserved the mirror, noted its placement, and reported every detail. She wasn't just a nurse, she was a quiet detective, a protector of clues. Her discipline preserved the evidence that would later help solve the mystery. She understood that medicine wasn't just about tending wounds, it was about context, consistency, and recording the truth. The wing became a private world during the worst of moments. In Order of the Phoenix, after Arthur Weasley's snake attack, the Weasley family gathered in the wing, pacing and whispering, fear clinging to every breath. Madame Pomfrey managed the tension with her usual restraint. "No shouting in my ward," she said. And it wasn't a rebuke, it was a protection. The space was sacred. Grief could enter, but chaos would not be permitted. This wasn't just about healing the wounded, it was about keeping a fragile peace in a place always one spell away from disaster. Harry often found himself in that ward, not because he sought trouble, but because trouble found him. After every ordeal, it was the hospital wing where his body was restored, his energy replenished, and his thoughts cleared. And it was always Pomfrey who oversaw this process, never questioning why a first year had faced a troll, or why a fourth year returned with a wand scorched from dark magic. She treated all wounds without judgment. Her neutrality was her strength. Even the final book, Deathly Hallows in its silence, echoed the loss of the hospital wing. When the Battle of Hogwarts erupted, there was no mention of it as a refuge. Its absence was loud, there was no longer time for the measured calm of Pomfrey's care. Students bled on the stone floors. Casualties were lined in the great hall, and only then did readers feel the depth of what had been lost, the sanctuary, the comfort, the invisible line between danger and healing that the hospital wing had always drawn. The films showed us students sitting upright in neat rows of beds, but the books gave us the sweat, the screams, the potions that tasted like poison, the fear, the hope, the whispers in the dark, the weight of magical failure, and the rare, golden moments of recovery. The wing was more than a backdrop. It was a crucible where young wizards and witches came undone and were made whole again. A place where silence held power, where time slowed, and where recovery was treated with reverence, not spectacle. Madame Pomfrey herself was one of the most competent and consistent adults in the entire series. She never left Hogwarts. She never wavered. "There's no need for a doctor," she once said briskly. "I can mend bones in seconds." Her pride wasn't arrogance. It was born of decades of service. She knew her place. She knew her purpose. She had no time for nonsense, but infinite time for pain. And that distinction made her unforgettable. There were wards for physical healing, charms to soothe trauma, even potions that altered memory when needed. Hospital wing was equipped with magic that bordered on sacred. It wasn't a lab, it wasn't a battlefield, it was a temple, and its priestess, Pomfrey, guarded it with quiet steel. The wing may have existed in the background, but it carried the weight of the entire castle in times of crisis. By focusing only on the great halls, the duels and the dances, the films missed an essential truth about Hogwarts. Magic often fails, and when it does, it is in the hospital wing that its victims are treated, not just with potions, but with patience, not just with spells, but with structure, not just with hope, but with healing. It was the school's hidden heartbeat, a reminder that even in a world of wands and wonder, recovery is an art all its own. Number 21, the deeper meaning behind the Marauder's map. Of all the magical objects in the Harry Potter series, the Marauder's map is perhaps one of the most misunderstood when transferred to the screen. In the films, it flickers briefly, an enchanted parchment that lets Harry sneak around corridors, a helpful tool in the adventure. But within the pages of the books, it is something more profound. It is the heartbeat of an older era, the whispered laughter of rebels who refused to be tamed, and a legacy stitched into ink by 4 boys who refused to let the castle define them. The Marauder's map is not just an object, it is a philosophy born of friendship, mischief, and resistance. Created by James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, the map is not simply the result of clever spellwork. It is a testament to who they were. James with his wild arrogance and lion-hearted charm, Sirius with his reckless brilliance and disdain for authority, Remus with his thoughtful caution and loyalty, and Peter with his desperate need to belong. The enchantments woven into the map were so advanced that even Dumbledore was impressed by them. It could track every person in the school, displaying their name and location in real time, regardless of magical concealment. Not even the invisibility cloak could fool it. But the real beauty of the map lies not in its function, but in its voice. Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, purveyors of aids to magical mischief makers, are proud to present the Marauder's map. It announces each time it's activated. This introduction is not a joke, it's a manifesto. The creators of the map were students who defied the rigid expectations of Hogwarts. They didn't seek to dismantle the school, but to reimagine it, to reclaim it. In their hands, the stone walls became a playground, the corridors a frontier. Every prank, every escape, every hidden passage they discovered was an act of self-definition. The films offer a glimpse of this mischief, but they miss the subversion. When Harry uses the map, it serves the plot. When the Marauders created it, it served their souls. Hogwarts was a place of rules, curfews, and punishments, but the Marauders' map gave them sovereignty. They did not ask permission to explore. They did not wait to be told what was allowed. They charted the school in their own image, and in doing so they carved out a space of freedom in a system that demanded obedience. This spirit is threaded into the text. When Lupin first returns the map to Harry, he says it is a very impudent piece of magic. That word, impudent, is key. The map is not polite. It does not respect authority. It mocks Severus Snape when he tries to use it. Mr. Mooney presents his compliments to Professor Snape and begs him to keep his abnormally large nose out of other people's business. This isn't just a joke, it's a line in the sand. The map does not belong to the institution. It belongs to the rule breakers. It sides with them. The Marauder's map was created during a time when the creators themselves were coming into their identities. For James and Sirius especially, the castle was both sanctuary and prison. James, with his talent and privilege, could have coasted. But instead he used his brilliance to challenge the expected. Sirius, fleeing a dark, pure-blood family, found refuge in rebellion. He wasn't just avoiding detention, he was building a life different from the one his family had planned. The map became their way of saying, "This school will not define us, we will define it." The map's power isn't just magical, it's emotional. It represents intimacy and trust. For 4 boys to create a map that knows every secret of the castle and to share it between them was to draw a circle of confidence. They trusted each other implicitly, enough to become animagi in secret, to protect Remus during his transformations, to risk everything for the joy of being together. The map is their friendship, inked into permanence. Every hidden staircase, every forgotten tunnel, it is a love letter to their youth, written in footprints. That emotional resonance is nowhere to be found in the films. In Prisoner of Azkaban, the map appears suddenly, handed over by Fred and George. It serves its purpose, helps Harry avoid danger, find Peter Pettigrew, but it does not breathe. It is not allowed to speak in its own voice. The viewers never hear the names Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs spoken with reverence. They are just code names, but in the book, they are the real names of boys who mattered. Boys who changed the lives of those who came after them. Harry doesn't just inherit the map, he inherits the spirit that made it. This inheritance is critical. For Harry, the map is more than a tool. It is a bridge to his father. He clutches it as if it holds a heartbeat. It is one of the few tangible links he has to James Potter. Through it, he walks the same paths, discovers the same secrets, hides in the same alcoves. The map does not just show him the castle, it shows him the past. In its lines, he finds echoes of his father's laughter, of Sirius's bark of mischief. It's a portal to memory, not just geography. There is a tragedy folded into the map too. Its creators met bitter ends. James and Lily died at the hands of Voldemort. Sirius was imprisoned for 12 years for a crime he didn't commit. Remus lived a life of exile, always half invisible to the world. And Peter betrayed them all. The map becomes haunted by this knowledge. When Harry sees Peter Pettigrew's name walking beside Ron, it is not just a revelation, it is a ghost rising. The map, silent for years, speaks again. It brings the past into the present with undeniable truth. One of the map's most compelling qualities is its refusal to be silenced. It can't be fooled, it does not lie. It shows Barty Crouch Jr. disguised as Moody. It shows Peter in his rat form. It reveals the real, often inconvenient truth. In a world where illusions abound, polyjuice potion, glamours, invisibility cloaks, the map is a rare constant. It respects no mask. That, too, is philosophical. The map refuses to comply with the convenient narratives others try to force. It tells the truth, even when the world isn't ready to hear it. This unwavering honesty connects deeply to the idea of resistance. The Marauders resisted more than rules, they resisted falsehoods. Hogwarts, for all its beauty, was still a place of secrets. Dumbledore's long game, the hidden war, the unspoken dangers. The map sliced through it all. It let its users see what was hidden, challenge what was accepted. It is radical transparency disguised as mischief. Its magic is rooted in refusal to accept the version of reality offered by those in charge. When Fred and George Weasley use the map, they understand this. Their pranks are not random, they're acts of joyful rebellion. When they give the map to Harry, they are passing down the philosophy, not just the parchment. They recognize in him a kindred spirit. Harry doesn't use the map just to escape curfew. He uses it to pursue truth, to uncover danger, to find his own path. Like the Marauders, he is learning to question authority, to think for himself, to walk without permission. Even Snape, who loathed James and Sirius, could not destroy the map. He tries, but it insults him instead. The map defends itself, not with violence, but with satire. That, too, is a choice. The Marauders could have made a weapon. Instead, they made a trickster. The map is not cruel, it's clever. It doesn't hurt, it humiliates. Its power is not domination, but exposure. It's not about control, it's about freedom. And this freedom is contagious. The map inspires those who use it to look differently at Hogwarts. What once seemed fixed, a locked door, a patrolling teacher, a forbidden corridor, becomes negotiable. The map whispers, there is always another way. That's the essence of its philosophy. Don't accept the limits you're given. Find the loophole, find the tunnel, draw your own lines. The Marauders did, and Harry continues that tradition. The absence of this depth in the films is a loss. They show the magic, but not the meaning. The Marauder's map is not just a GPS for wizards, it is a declaration of identity. It is what happens when young people claim their space, challenge their world, and create something enduring. It is defiance made visible. Each time it's used, it reminds the reader that rules are not always right, that authority is not always just, and that joy itself can be an act of resistance. The map stands as a memorial, not to loss, but to life. To the lives the Marauders lived, brief and burning, to their refusal to be small, to their love for each other, however doomed. The castle forgot them, the staff forgot them, but the map remembered. It carried them forward, and in giving it to Harry, the past found its future. A boy who would fight in his own way, who would use knowledge not just to hide, but to protect. A boy who would walk the same halls and leave his own mark. Thus, the Marauder's map is not merely enchanted parchment. It is a philosophy with footprints. It is freedom inked in mischief, memory coded in magic. And to understand Hogwarts fully, one must walk its halls not just with wand in hand, but with the map open and the words, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," lighting the way forward. Number 22, background magic in everyday life. The staircase moved again. Harry gripped the banister and stared down, watching the ground floor vanish below him and reappear again as the stairwell curved in a direction he hadn't intended. He wasn't lost, not exactly, but he also wasn't where he had planned to be. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, this was a daily reality, not a metaphor, and it was far more than a whimsical quirk. Of an enchanted building, it was a warning that Hogwarts was alive, a living structure with a will of its own. What the films failed to capture, or deliberately omitted, was this vivid, unsettling truth. The castle itself was a character. It could defy plans, conceal secrets, test loyalties, and protect or endanger its residents. In the books, the castle's architecture was a shifting labyrinth that could not be mapped. When the Marauders created their infamous Marauder's map, they achieved the impossible, a tool that exposed the otherwise unknowable soul of the building. But even that map had its limitations. It never explained why things moved. It only recorded what they did. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, readers learn of doors that remain locked no matter how many times you try Alohomora. There's even a room that vanishes altogether unless you walk past it 3 times thinking of what you need. That room, the Room of Requirement, is the most dramatic example of Hogwarts' sentience. When Dumbledore's army needed a sanctuary to practice magic in secret, the castle provided one, fully furnished with cushions, shelves of books and training dummies. Yet when Draco Malfoy needed a place to hide a vanishing cabinet, it changed again, becoming a room filled with lost and forbidden objects. The room served whoever needed it most, but it also made choices. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire during the Yule Ball, students used different routes to reach the Great Hall, because some staircases had disappeared entirely. McGonagall made no comment on this. None of the professors did. It was part of life at Hogwarts. New students had to learn quickly. Never assume the way you took yesterday will still be there today. The films often showed students walking through elegant, fixed corridors. In truth, corridors could lead to nowhere or to somewhere else entirely, depending on the hour. The 7th floor, near the tapestry of Barnabas the Balmy, was notorious for playing tricks. That tapestry never moved, but the wall opposite it, which concealed the Room of Requirement, could be a blank expanse one day and a door the next. Only those who knew the ritual could access it. But how did the wall know what was needed? That was the central mystery. The Room of Requirement didn't just respond to incantations, it responded to intent, urgency, and emotion. Even staircases had personalities. Some were slow and creaky, others swift and silent. Some tried to trick students by pretending to reach the right floor before swiveling halfway through. Peeves often exploited this. He once lured a group of first years onto the wrong staircase just as it rotated, trapping them near the 3rd floor corridor, where Fluffy was stationed. The castle enabled this chaos, yet it never intervened. On several occasions, the castle's decisions bordered on cruelty. In Chamber of Secrets, when Harry tried to reach Professor Lockhart's office, he found himself redirected multiple times by shifting passageways and vanishing doors. Some might call this coincidence, but it is heavily implied that Hogwarts chose not to make it easy. It sensed fear, it rewarded courage, and punished hesitation. Harry, ever brave, pressed on, but it was clear. The castle demanded more than just physical presence. It demanded will. The common rooms, too, were guarded by intelligence. Gryffindor's entrance was protected by the Fat Lady, who demanded a password. Hufflepuff's entrance required a rhythmic tap on barrels. Mistake would result in a dousing of vinegar. Ravenclaw's was the most cerebral, a door knocker that posed riddles. If you answered incorrectly, you waited. Time was the toll. The school was filtering not only by house but by traits. Thought, patience, cleverness, rhythm. All were part of the castle's design. It sorted students even after the sorting hat had spoken. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry follows Draco using the Marauder's map and observes him vanish within the 7th floor corridor. The film shows Draco walking into the Room of Requirement, but the book hints at something more elusive. The corridor absorbs him. The map shows footprints vanishing into nothing. This isn't just magical concealment, it's architecture as camouflage. The castle is a shroud, a guardian of secrets. The forbidden corridor on the 3rd floor, where Fluffy stood guard in the first book, is another example. It did not exist on the Marauder's map. Filch had once told a student, "There's a broom cupboard that sometimes pretends to be a passage to the 3rd floor tower." That passage, however, was only present on Tuesdays. What other buildings decide what day it is before they allow navigation? Another overlooked element is the moving paintings. While the films treat them as comic relief or exposition devices in the books, they serve as an internal network, a bloodline of Hogwarts memory. They whisper passwords, share rumors, and in times of danger, carry warnings. "I'm off to see the Fat Lady," Sir Cadogan once shouted, galloping between frames. The paintings were not merely ornamental, they were arteries in a circulatory system of sentient stone. Consider the scene in Order of the Phoenix, where Harry, Ron, and Hermione try to locate the Room of Requirement for the first time. It takes trial and error. They walk back and forth repeatedly before the door appears. The key isn't magic in the traditional sense, it's intent. The door obeys emotional clarity. The castle listens. Some doors were purely deceptive, others required ritual. The door to Dumbledore's office, for instance, demanded a password, usually a sweet. "Sherbet lemon," he once told Harry, but the gargoyle that guarded the spiral staircase didn't just respond to words, it responded to voice, to authority, to recognition. When Umbridge tried to enter uninvited, the door resisted. Dumbledore had not removed her access. The castle had. In Deathly Hallows, the castle becomes a battlefield, yet even then it participates. The statues come alive, the armor marches. "Hogwarts is threatened," McGonagall cries. "Man the boundaries, protect us, do your duty to our school." And they do, they respond, not because of a charm, because they are part of the castle, because the school wants to survive. The very structure fights for its students. And then there are the vanished rooms. Entire chambers referenced in passing, never found again. Filch mutters about a lost classroom that had once taught ghoul studies. In Goblet of Fire, a bathroom Harry uses on the 5th floor has never been mentioned before and never will be again. Myrtle haunts one bathroom, but there are dozens and only some remain constant. Others fade, slide sideways or crumble into dust before anyone can prove they were real. The castle holds its history in fragments. There's a corridor lined with broken armor. No one knows why it's broken. A tapestry that's been half-eaten by flame. No one knows the fire's origin. An entire wing sealed off since the 1800s. Why? Dumbledore never explains it. These aren't oversights. They are intentional hints that the castle evolves, that it remembers. In Prisoner of Azkaban, the grand staircase behaves with particular oddity. It tries to send Harry into the second-floor girls' bathroom on one occasion, an area with no magical relevance at the time. Or so it seems. Only later does that floor become relevant again, when the Chamber of Secrets entrance is found there. Did the staircase know? The films do show moving staircases, shifting walls, and talking portraits, but they present these as aesthetic features like the revolving floors of a theme park. The books go deeper. The staircases don't just move, they choose. The walls don't just shimmer, they listen, and the portraits don't just talk, they warn. This sentience, this subtle yet constant presence of decision, is what makes the castle terrifying and beautiful. For a student like Neville Longbottom, the castle was both a challenge and a tutor. He once got trapped behind a tapestry for hours. Another time he found a shortcut that no one else knew, one that saved Harry and Luna in Order of the Phoenix. Was this luck? Or was the castle helping Neville, the future sword-bearer? Even Fred and George, pranksters by nature, learned to respect the building. "We've mapped a lot," George once said, "but there are parts the map doesn't show." The castle let them explore, Hannah, to a point, but it also withheld. When the trio returns in Deathly Hallows, Hogwarts is scarred. Its corridors are cracked, walls lined with cruel posters from the Carrows, but even then, secret tunnels open. The Room of Requirement appears one last time, its ultimate transformation. This time it is a bridge connecting to Hogsmeade, ensuring that help can reach the students. The school adapts to the needs of war. The films give us a Hogwarts of grandeur, a stage for magic. But the books give us a Hogwarts that breathes, that thinks, that remembers, a school that raises its students not just through teachers, but through walls that whisper and floors that vanish beneath their feet, a building that demands curiosity, courage, and humility, a building that changes you and itself every day. Number 23, Magical Pets with Special Abilities. The first time Harry Potter entered Hogwarts, he was captivated not only by its towering spires and floating candles, but by the feeling that the building itself was alive. This sensation, so vivid in J.K. Rowling's books, was built on hundreds of tiny magical details, details that often slipped through the cinematic lens. While the films dazzled with dragons and duels, they rarely paused long enough to linger on the quiet, whimsical oddities that made life in the wizarding world feel so fully realized. The books, however, brim with enchanted minutiae, presenting magic not as spectacle, but as ordinary utility. Hogwarts was not just a school for magic. It was a magical organism humming with life even when its halls were empty. Among the most charming of these overlooked wonders are the self-writing quills. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione is described as using a self-inking quill while frantically completing her work. These were not simply tools, but near-sentient companions, capable of capturing thoughts the moment they formed. For students like Hermione, who often juggled a dozen assignments at once, these quills were lifelines. But they also had quirks. Fred and George Weasley, of course, preferred the variety that exaggerated letters for comic effect, occasionally slipping in a singing quill or one that insulted the reader. Such peculiarities were never just background noise. They told readers that in Hogwarts even the tools had personality. Then there were the books. Not just any books, but the Monster Book of Monsters, a snarling, bucking volume assigned for care of magical creatures in Harry's 3rd year. Hagrid, ever the optimist, assumed students would simply stroke the spine to calm it down, a detail that was more trouble than help for many. The films show a quick glimpse of this creature, but in the books it's a running hazard. Neville Longbottom was nearly mauled. Several students lost satchels to its teeth. These books were more than props. They were a magical manifestation of how even education in Hogwarts refused to be dull. You didn't just read a textbook, you tamed it. Other books whispered to their readers late at night. In the restricted section of the library, Harry once opened a volume that let out a human-like shriek, loud enough to alert the caretaker. This idea that knowledge itself was sentient, that books could guard their secrets or reveal them selectively, was enchanting in the most literal sense. Hogwarts Library wasn't a quiet refuge, but a place of living intellect, with dusty tomes that judged, tempted, or punished the curious. The films, limited by runtime, skipped this element of narrative texture, but for those who lingered in the written pages, the library was a jungle of sentient parchment. Even cooking and cleaning bore the mark of magic. House elves, unseen by most students, prepared feasts with spells that danced pots through the air and chopped vegetables in mid-flight. The kitchens, as seen only briefly in Goblet of Fire, were hidden behind a painting of a fruit bowl that tickled into revealing the passage when prompted. Inside, hundreds of elves stirred soups that sang lullabies and ladled gravy that thickened with emotion. While Dobby and Creature are central figures, the enchantment of the Hogwarts kitchen was never meant to be political. It was meant to feel like an old fairy tale. The corridors themselves pulsed with unseen magic. Certain tapestries whispered riddles or hummed lullabies when no one was listening. Suits of armor, particularly talkative around Christmas, commented on the weather or sang carols in discordant harmony. In Order of the Phoenix, a suit of armor yelled, "Piss off!" when Peeves tried to rearrange its helmet. These interactions weren't plot points, they were living proof that Hogwarts was aware of itself, and the floors, oh the floors, cleaned themselves with a gentle ripple of magic that flowed like invisible water, sweeping away dust and mischief in one motion. Not a single mop was ever seen. Even the dirt feared Hogwarts' precision. Broomsticks, too, had a sort of agency. In the first flying lesson, Madam Hooch instructs students to command their brooms with a firm up. Some leapt into hands, others rolled away out of spite. This wasn't just physical comedy. Rowling was telling us that in this world even transportation was temperamental. When Harry finally mounts his Nimbus 2000, it responds like a loyal hound, whistling through the air with a joy that mirrors his own. The films turned brooms into sleek vehicles for Quidditch matches, but in the books they were pets, tools, sometimes even rivals. The staircases were never still. They rearranged themselves hourly, folding and twisting with a mind of their own. Ron once grumbled that they liked to trap him late for class. In Philosopher's Stone, Harry and Ron get caught on one that leads them to a forbidden corridor. The risk wasn't just in what the staircase revealed, but in the idea that one could never trust the layout of the castle. Hogwarts constantly shifted, as though it were a creature testing its inhabitants, deciding who was worthy of secrets. The films touched on this, but they didn't capture the anxiety or thrill of never being quite sure where you'd end up. Magical portraits provided both comfort and chaos. They moved from frame to frame, gossiped with one another, and carried news faster than any owl. The fat lady, guardian of Gryffindor Tower, had her moods and preferences. In Prisoner of Azkaban, after being attacked by Sirius Black, she refused to return until her painting was properly restored. Another portrait, of Sir Cadogan, took over for her temporarily, challenging students to duels and confusing them with constantly changing passwords like oddsbodikins. The idea that even security measures had personalities is hilarious and terrifying. A password alone wasn't enough. You needed the portrait's cooperation. Tapestries weren't just decoration. One displayed the attempted genealogy of the Black family, with names burned off in scorched protest. Another reenacted goblin uprisings in endless, looping animations. These pieces of fabric told history in real time. They breathed, changed, sometimes even argued. Fred and George once swore they saw a tapestry's knight break his lance out of frustration. Again, the magic was in the margins. Even the weather had moods. The ceiling in the Great Hall reflected the sky outside, a feature so subtle that most students forgot it was magical. Hermione, of course, never did. It was charmed to mirror the actual weather, creating a link between the inner sanctum of the school and the unpredictable world beyond. When storms rolled in, thunder boomed over their heads while they ate. When stars blinked through clouds, they seemed close enough to touch. The ceiling didn't just display weather, it transformed the Great Hall into a cathedral of magic. Then there were the enchanted items that students carried. Ron had a broken wand for much of Chamber of Secrets, which backfired comically but also dangerously. Seamus Finnegan's wand constantly exploded, singeing eyebrows and setting robes aflame. Neville's remembrall glowed red when he forgot something, but never told him what he forgot. These items didn't merely assist students, they mocked, challenged, and reflected their personalities. Ghosts drifted through walls without apology. Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington, nearly Headless Nick, threw parties filled with the scent of mould and the cold bite of the grave. Moaning Myrtle haunted the bathroom, her presence turning an ordinary toilet into a tragic narrative. The Bloody Baron terrified even Peeves. These ghosts weren't special effects. They were echoes of a school that respected memory and history, spirits embedded in its very walls. Even punishment bore magical flair. The lines Harry wrote with Dolores Umbridge's enchanted quill cut into his skin, etching the words, "I must not tell lies," without ink. Detention was often a trial of moral endurance, not just physical labour. Filch still clung to the idea of chains and shackles, though thankfully they were no longer in use. The point was that consequences at Hogwarts were as enchanted, and sometimes as dangerous, as the lessons. Common rooms each reflected magical quirks of their houses. Gryffindor Tower was warm, lined with soft red chairs that seemed to breathe. Ravenclaw's common room demanded riddles to enter, and its windows looked out over vast skies, instilling humility. Hufflepuff's entrance was near the kitchens, and their room was cosy and earthy, filled with plants that responded to music. Slytherin's common room, set in the dungeons, had greenish light filtering through waterlogged windows from the Black Lake. Each space was more than a lounge, it was a magical ecosystem echoing the values of the house. Even pets in Hogwarts had their own magic. Crookshanks was no ordinary cat. Part Kneazle, he could sense untrustworthy people, snarling at Pettigrew in disguise. Hedwig wasn't just a post owl, she was fiercely intelligent. bearing grudges and affection in equal measure. Trevor the toad was constantly vanishing, possibly enjoying adventures no one witnessed. Animals in Hogwarts weren't background characters. They were part of the school's magical rhythm. In the room of requirement, magic responded to needs so intuitively it felt like a dream. When Dumbledore's army needed a training room, it became one. When Draco needed a place to repair the vanishing cabinet, it shifted again. The room produced cushions for practice, weapons for defense, and even hidden treasures from centuries of students. It was a room that listened and transformed. No movie scene could possibly convey its quiet majesty, its sense of sentient compassion. Even the bathrooms were enchanted. The prefect's bathroom, as Harry discovered in Goblet of Fire, had golden taps that released bubbles, foam, and even mermaid songs. Baths weren't just for cleaning, they were for transformation, reflection, and sometimes solving riddles etched into golden eggs. The idea that even hygiene could be magical is a detail no film dared dwell on. And then there was Peeves. Not a ghost, not a man, but a poltergeist uniquely tied to the emotional frequency of Hogwarts. He reacted to stress, to joy, to conflict. He hurled inkpots at teachers, sang mocking songs, and once dropped a bag of tarantulas on a group of second years. Yet in Deathly Hallows, when the final battle began, Peeves fought for Hogwarts, pelting Death Eaters with chalk and slingshots. Peeves wasn't just comic relief. He was a symbol of the school's chaotic heart. The films cut him entirely. But in the books he was always there, laughing in the margins. These details were not grand. They didn't advance the plot or change the fate of the wizarding world, but they mattered. They made Hogwarts feel real, not just a castle where magic happened, but a place where magic was. A place where floors whispered, books bit, portraits advised, and every corner held something unexpected. The films gave us a glimpse of that world, but the books let us live in it. And in those quiet, enchanted corners, we found something rare, a magical world that didn't need to explain itself. It simply was. Number 24. Flying quills, talking books, and other everyday magical details. Of all the wondrous aspects of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the presence of magical creatures and pets remains one of the most consistently overlooked elements in the films. The books, in contrast, make it clear that animals in the wizarding world are far more than companions. They are intelligent, intuitive, and often deeply magical in nature. The official Hogwarts acceptance letter specifies that each student may bring an owl, a cat, or a toad. At first glance, this detail appears charming but inconsequential. Yet over the course of 7 books, J.K. Rowling reveals that these creatures influence the story in ways that hint at a deeper connection between humans and animals in the magical realm. Consider the owls. At first, they seem to serve the practical purpose of delivering letters and packages, no matter the destination. But their abilities far surpass that of any postal service. Hedwig, Harry Potter's snowy owl, does not merely carry mail. She understands moods, exhibits loyalty, and disobeys when necessary. In the Goblet of Fire, Harry writes a letter to Sirius and whispers that he doesn't know where Sirius is. Hedwig flies off and somehow finds him in hiding. No instructions, no address, just loyalty and magical instinct. She'll find him, Harry says, and she does. It's not just delivery, it's devotion wrapped in feathers. Hedwig is not alone in this. The school owlery is filled with birds capable of navigating weather, time zones, and even magical concealments. How does an owl find someone hiding from the entire Ministry of Magic? The books never explain, but the implications are extraordinary. These are not mere birds. They possess a magical attunement that defies logic. They know their targets not through geography, but perhaps through emotional or magical resonance. Their magic is instinctive, and it's stronger than any spelled compass. Crookshanks, Hermione Granger's unusually large and squashed-faced cat, is another case of animal intelligence surpassing expectations. When Hermione buys him from the magical menagerie, The shopkeeper mentions that he's been difficult to sell because he's part Kneazle. Kneazles are known for their ability to detect untrustworthiness, and Crookshanks lives up to that gift. He distrusts Scabbers from the start, attempting on multiple occasions to attack him. The other characters think it's a simple predator instinct until it's revealed that Scabbers is not a rat at all, but the animagus Peter Pettigrew. Crookshanks aligns himself with Sirius Black, a supposed murderer on the run before anyone knows Sirius is innocent. He even assists Sirius in luring Ron and Pettigrew to the Shrieking Shack. This is not the behavior of a house pet. It's the deliberate, calculated action of a creature that can see truth hidden under skin and lies. If Crookshanks hadn't been so clever, Hermione admits later, we might never have known. Crookshanks isn't a sidekick, he's a detective. Then there are the toads, creatures that seem the most underwhelming. Neville Longbottom brings his toad, Trevor, to Hogwarts, where he promptly becomes a running gag for escaping and being lost. But what is Trevor, really? There is a strong theory among readers that Trevor is more than a toad. Some speculate he is an animagus, perhaps even Neville's missing grandfather. While this theory remains unconfirmed, it reflects how deeply readers have come to expect secrets in the skin of animals. Even the most humble creature may hide something more.